Hi, I'm Lisa Gonzales, Chief Business Officer here in Mt Diablo. In this week's episode of Ask the CBO, I'm going to go back and review some of our one-time funding. It seems to be that there may be some confusion as to what we've done with some of the funds. And so I'm going to pull some old slides, I'll add some new ones and try to make this as helpful as possible. So this video is really going to take a look at the rules around the CARES Act funds, what each funding source allowed us to do, how we spent it, and then I'm going to review two new pots of money, if you will. One that's called AB 86. There's two components of that, came from the state of California. We had a board-approved plan back in June for that. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about ESSER 2 and then the upcoming ESSER 3 and what some of the rules are and what we're thinking there. So to start with, I want to go back and I want to talk about the CARES Act. So the CARES Act was really intended by the federal government to make sure that we were able to protect staff. We were able to address a number of different issues where if we had not had these funds as a result of the pandemic, we would have had significant financial problems. It allowed us to add all sorts of new support that we would not have been able to afford. I mean, just think from the perspective of technology right now, equipment, personal protective equipment, a great deal of overtime for many, many staff members. And so that really ended up helping us there. We worked with the staff, we developed a plan. We tried to make sure that everything that we were doing was very engaging and supportive of students, especially with distance learning. And CARES Act was really the money that we had up until the end of this last school year. And it allowed us to cover a number of operational costs that if you were at last night's board meeting or you heard about it, it allowed us to have a healthier ending fund balance. So real briefly, this is a slide that I shared back in the spring when I talked about the learning loss, the mitigation, the intent of the CARES Act fund. And there were really three main funds that were part of a plan that we had to write. And you'll see those three there on the top. Of course, in education, we love our acronyms: GEAR, CRF, the Coronavirus Fund, and then the governor's resources. And then there were CARES Act funds. And CARES Act really encompasses all of those three at the top, plus something that was called ESSER, or now we know that it's called ESSER 1. So the total amount that we spent over the bulk of last year was $24 million. Again, this is a repeat slide. Just wanted to reiterate this. 15.4 million in coronavirus funds. This is what we covered, everything from personal protective equipment to making sure that we didn't lay off employees that didn't necessarily have the work that was there last year, substitutes, bus drivers, some of the custodians that the year before we had brought to the board. We added additional prep and planning time for all of our teachers. We had teachers on special assignment that were helping us specifically related to the pandemic. We had some stipends that we had agreed to, counselors, scheduling, some of the licenses that we were moving forward with. When it came to GEAR, we had $1.9 million, and that was really additional prep time and planning for teachers, PPEs, noon supervisors, because our noon supervisors and our campus supervisors with no students there, we had other work for them to do. There was $2.3 million in Resource 7420. This is the governor's resource. We had additional custodial time. As you can well imagine, we had the middle school additional planning and prep time, credit recovery. And again, this is just sort of a bigger perspective as to what it was. There were certainly other line items in there that were much smaller, but you get the gist of what we did over the course of the last school year. Finally, ESSER 1. ESSER 1, we had different work for our transportation assistants, planning time, technology for students, additional staff who were doing new and different work, more PPEs. And so that was really the crux of what we spent last year. $24 million. We received all of the funds. They have all been spent according to the funding sources. We have submitted all the reports to the state and to the federal government. And I do want to remind everyone that we work really closely with our auditors from Crow, and what they do is they respond to every question that we have. What about this? What about this? What about this? Because we wanted to try to make sure that we were maximizing these funds as much as possible to really help the district rebound from the state's fiscal crisis. So what do we have left? And what are we going to use it for? So this is Assembly Bill 86. There are two different parts of Assembly Bill 86. The first part is the expanded learning grant that you see on the left. This was a plan that was approved by the board. 19 million was awarded, but we only received part of that, 50% of it in the last school year. The rules on that one are that 85% of those funds must be provided for in-person services for students. And I'll show you those in just a second. Specifically, 10% of all of those funds are for paraprofessionals. Those are assistants that work in our classrooms. And then anything that is a capital expense. A capital expense is any item that is more than $5,000. So if I put in an HVAC, that would be capital, but a teacher laptop would not. So we have to get pre-approval, or in some of these cases, post-approval from the CDE to make sure that we are properly getting permission to spend those. There's also a separate amount of money, also in Assembly Bill 86, got another acronym, in-person learning grant. We got that because we had students back on our campuses by April 1st. That meant that we received an additional almost $9.1 million from the state. Did not require a plan. I guess it's April 2nd, excuse me. And so far to date, we received half of that, 50%. So let's just for a second, take a look at AB 86 expanded learning opportunities. This is what we said in the plan. We're able to provide paraprofessionals, tutoring, extended school day, educator training, health, counseling, mental health, assessment, credit recovery, access to meals, which of course then we had the federal program, which sort of changed everything because there's no charge for meals this year. And then a great deal for us of technology to make sure that we can have students back on campuses and everybody is able to connect. So I'm going to let these slides sit for just a second or so that you can see examples of what it is that we have already put in place. TIS is our technology staff, overtime for board meetings, training, summer professional development. In our plan, we added many 1-year and 2-year positions. Intervention teachers, TIL stipends, our technology stipends, virtual academy program. We expanded CARES at Concord High and Westwood Elementary, and we have a new attendance program that we're going to roll out. Here are some more. And again, these are some of the things that we're putting in and spending. So what you'll see with all of this is we're trying to be as careful and creative within the rules. We are making sure that the bulk of these are directly affecting students in classrooms. Teletherapy, student support, college and career. We have some wireless access issues at a handful of our schools, and so those are top priorities for us. Many of our licenses that allow us to instruct, laptops, hotspots, Chromebooks. Let's move to AB 86, the in-person. This is what's allowable. Anything related to COVID, more PPEs, ventilation, upgrades, mental health support, and salaries that tied to in-person. And so what we did with that, you will remember that the board approved in June a $1,500 stipend for all permanent staff members. Custodian overtime and extra time. We are adding additional noon and campus supervisors to most of our school sites. Tech support. We're using a great deal of assistance right now with COVID tracking and testing. Food warmers so that we have more locations where students can pick up food so that we can make lines shorter. I'm sure you've all seen the new hydration stations. There will be more to come, but we have those at all of our school sites. The board approved last night at the board meeting, Robert Half, temps for additional support for things that are coming up, like assistance with getting Chromebooks out to over 12,000 students at the middle school and high school level. Now, there are two other amounts of money. These are our ESSERs. So you heard about ESSER 1 that we had that we spent. We also have ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. ESSER 2 was awarded by former President Trump in December. ESSER 3 was awarded in March. So what's happened with these is we got the first part of ESSER 2 at the very end of the school year. ESSER 3, we have not received any of those funds yet because we are putting together our plan for community vetting and board approval. In the meantime, this is what's allowable: cleaning, meals, technology, summer programs, extended school year, any type of assessment systems, anything that we really need for instructional programs, we can cover here. Parent support, facility repairs. This is brand new and they specifically called these out. Facility repair, air systems, including air systems in vehicles, school safety, and continuity of services. And the rule with ESSER 3 you see on the bottom is 20% of it has to be tied to learning loss. What are we going to do for students in order to mitigate the impacts of the pandemic? Here are some of the examples of the ESSER 2 funds and what we have been spending. Retraining in spring, additional staff assistance. Our virtual academy has grown considerably. Additional FTE for this last school year and for this year to address the enrollment drop. I just want to touch on teacher laptops there. I realize that we've been waiting since June of last year. Our plan is to swap out more than half of our teacher laptops as soon as we get that order in. So we know that we've got teachers that are waiting. You can't get cars, you can't get computers right now, but this is a huge priority for us. A couple more on ESSER 2, the cost of the TRAN, that was I want to say about $550,000. Notable unemployment insurance increase for us. It was about 1.3 million beyond what we were expecting. COVID legal fees and the cost of COVID leaves. ESSER 3, we've got a plan that's going to come to the board in October. We're going to be vetting this with the community. Here are some of the things that we're planning. Tables and umbrellas for school sites, setting all of those up. A lot of these, again, were outlined in the original plan that we created with the board for expanded learning. And we said some of these positions we want to be 2-year and 3-year because we don't think that the impacts are just going to be felt in 1 year, and we can address all of those. So you'll see quite a few in there. Summer school for next year, a 2nd and 3rd year of CARES, the teacher laptop refresh that we mentioned, very outdated buses and vehicles. Some of our vehicles were 1980s, an emergency generator, fencing, security cameras, HVAC, technology infrastructure. So that pretty much sums it up. Wanted to make sure that we put this information out. I will be creating a couple of 1-pagers just so that we are able to share the information about CARES Act. And then the 4 new funding sources that we have. I wish there was another name for it, but I'm trying to make sure that it's not confusing with CARES Act. Again, I hope that these videos are helpful. I realize this one was a tad bit long, but there seems to have been a lot of questions, and I wanted to make sure that I answered those. If you've got a question, if there's a topic that you would like me to cover, I'm always looking for great topics. You can email me at cbo@mdusd.org. And I'm usually pretty quick on getting back with people, and I'm happy to take your suggestions for future topics.